All right, I will say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of the sponsors of this morning's share. To thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for the month of Kislev, Josh and Becca Friedman, for dedicating all the Shiurim and Joshos this month. We have the yahrzeit of Josh's father, Yisroel Yehuda ben HaRav Chaim Rephael, for an aliyah for the Neshamas of all of those who were murdered al Kiddush Hashem on Shmini Esterson and Simchas Torah in Eretz Yisrael, and for a safe return for all of our hostages and chayalim. Semi and Malka, Esterson in memory of their parents, Hinda bas Becca Friedman, Yitzchak Leib ben Aaron HaKohen, and Sarah Rachel bas Baruch Avram. The Pepper family in memory of their brother and uncle, Yosef Pepper, Yosef David ben Yaakov, Zichron Livracha. Our week of learning sponsors, Gail and Doug Stenger, in memory of Doug's father, Shraga Feibel ben Moshe Avram Halevi. And of course, as a shir, we dedicate our entire Maseches Bava Kamma, Le'iloi Nishmas, Master Sergeant Eliyahu Michal Harush. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD TORAH, all of the Neshama will have an aliyah, and the families in Neshama. With that, let us begin. So today's daf, Baruch Hashem, is daf Chavches. We have a lot to do today, Baruch Hashem, a really incredible sugya ahead of us. We are beginning. We're picking up on daf Chav Zayin Amud Beis. So we'll say, if you remember again, we left off with the following situation. Rav Chisda has sent a shayla to Rav Nachman, specifically regarding the issue of boshes. Right? Specifically, this idea, and I will say, boshes is an interesting payment. So we've already discussed the idea. You only go ahead and pay boshes if there's intentionality, if a person is mazid or karov lemazid. And now Rav Chisda was saying to Rav Nachman, depending on how you go ahead and you injure someone, so that determines the amount of the boshes payment. Rav Chisda then asked Rav Nachman about a very specific case regarding the following situation. Reuven and Shimon shared a well. Each of them had the right to go ahead and draw water from the well on one day. On the day that should have been Reuven's, so Shimon goes ahead and draws from the well. What did Reuven do? Reuven hit him with shovel, right? So Rav Nachman said, Rav Chisda said to Rav Nachman, what's the payment of boshes for boshes in such a scenario like that, where Reuven strikes Shimon with the shovel? So I'll say, so interesting. So what did Rav Chisda respond? Rav Chisda responded that he could have hit him with a shovel 100 times. Right? He was absolutely entitled to hit him with a shovel, because again, at the end of the day, Shimon was depriving Reuven of his right to the well. So I'll say that's where we left off with. So the Gemara says, Amarle, mea pandi bepanda lemechia. So that is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 lines up from the bottom. So again, so Rav Nachman responds to Rav Chisda, he could have struck him with the shovel 100 times. So the Gemara says, well, interesting. Afilu manda amar lo avid inish dinu lenafshei, b'makom psida avid inish dinu lenafshei. Rabbi said, this actually raises a very interesting point. So essentially what Rav Nachman is saying to Rav Chisda is that a person is able to go ahead, literally translated, to take the law into their own hands. That if I see myself about to suffer a loss, I have the right to take the law into my own hands in order to prevent that particular loss. The Gemara says, what's happening over here? So Reuven is going to hit Shimon with a shovel in order to get Shimon to stop taking from his well. So essentially the Gemara says like this, even according to the opinion that says that a person normally cannot take the law into their own hands. There's a system. Someone's doing something that upsets you, someone's doing something that, legally adversely impacts you. Someone's taking something from you. You take it to Beis Din. There's a legal process. We don't believe in vigilante justice. However, the Gemara says, if I'm suffering a loss, and again, here's the issue. If I'm suffering a loss, now if I have to go to Beis Din, so bepashtos, what's going to happen? The loss is going to become amplified. Seen according to the opinion that says you can't normally take the law into your own hands, in a situation of loss, you are permitted to take the law into your own hands. Look at Rashi. Rashi says, Lo avid inish dina lenafshei, va'afilu din emes. I will say, now, obviously, we're not talking about a situation where we're not sure about what the halacha is, right? Where there's some ambiguity. Let's say it's a situation where it's clear, like in this case over here. Reuven and Shimon own the well together. Remember again, Wednesday is with Shimon's day, and Thursday is Reuven's day. And comes Thursday, Reuven shows up, and Shimon's drawing water from the well. That's wrong. That's illegal. That's in breach of the agreement. There's no two sides to this. That's it. So the Gemara suggests. So again, so normally there's an opinion that says even when the law is clearly on your side, you still can't take legal matters into your own hands. However, Rashi says, see, the problem we'll say is that sometimes if a person goes to Beis Din, O Shema Yichlu Hamayim min Habar Ve'elo Piraon Lazeh to Kamaf. So we'll say, so what's the issue in this case? The issue in this case is by the time Reuven goes to Beis Din, remember what's going to happen. By the time Reuven is going to Beis Din, Shimon's still continuously drawing water, right? And so again, the loss is going to continue. Reuven doesn't know how to quantify the loss because Shimon's going to keep taking water. In this case, Rashi says, Ki Gavna Avid Inish Dil and Avshay. So we'll say, so there's two things happening over here. Number one, there's a general machlokes. Are you allowed to take the law into your own hands? Right? That's the. Are you allowed to go ahead and take action in order to stave off loss for yourself in a situation where clearly the halach, right, or in a situation where the halach is clear and the law clearly sides with you? So that's the machlokes. But the Gemara is suggesting even the opinion that says that you normally can't do that, but makom pseida, in a situation of loss, like in our case over here, everyone agrees that you can take the law into your own hands in order to stave off loss. Okay, the Itmar Rabbi Yehuda says, Lo Avid Inish Dil and Avshay. In general, Rabbi Yehuda says, a person can't take the law into their own hands. Rav Nachman Amar Avid Dina Lenafshay. Rav Nachman says, yes, you can. So the Gemara says, but Heicha Diika, please pseida, but when there is a situation of loss, like for example, in this case over here, everyone agrees that halacha l'maisa, you could take the law into your own hands, and you could go ahead and do what you need to do in order to stave off any further loss. Kipli. So where's the machlokes? Heicha deleka psida, in a situation where there is no loss. Where there is no loss. And I was about to say, so if I have a dispute with Reuven, even though it's clear that the halacha sides with me, if there's not an ongoing loss, then again, at least Rabbi Yehuda says, take it to Beis Din. But where there is a loss, halacha l'maisa, you're allowed to say, everyone agrees, you can take the law into your hands. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Lo Avid Inish Dil L'Nafshei, Techevon Deleka Psida, Lezel Kane Daino. Rabbi Yehuda says, look, even though the halacha might be clear that you're in the right and the other guy's in the wrong, if there's not an ongoing imminent loss, take it to Beis Din. Just go the legal route and allow it to get resolved in the proper way. Rav Nachman Amar Avid Inish Dina L'Nafshei Dechiven Dibedin Avid Lo TORAH. So this is interesting. Rav Nachman says no. Rav Nachman says halacha says like this: in a situation where it is clear that you are in the right. I will say, understand. Those kind of cases are sometimes a little bit far and few. But in other words, I have a situation where it's clear that you're right and the other guy is wrong. I always say, even in the well case, right? Even in the well case, as much as it seems pretty straightforward here, Shimon is drawing water on Reuven's day. But yet again, I don't know, maybe Shimon has a counter taina, right? Otherwise, see, in this case, the way that it worked out over here is Reuven says to Shimon, it's my day. And essentially Shimon says, I don't care. So that's a case where it's explicit that Reuven is right and Shimon is wrong. But Lamaisa, again, only in that kind of case could you take matters into your own hands. So Nachman will say, look, if halacha Lamaisa, Reuven's right and Shimon's wrong, the system doesn't require Reuven to go to Beis Din. Going to Beis Din is still a tircha. Right? It still creates sometimes like an undue stress, undue difficulties. And therefore Nachman says if the law clearly sides with you, you don't have to avail yourself of the legal process. Take matters into your own hands. So we'll say fascinating machlokes. Machlokes Rav Nachman and Rabbi Yehuda. Can a person take the law into their own hands? Rabbi Yehuda says never. Rav Nachman says always, right? But only in a case where it's clear that you are correct. But everyone agrees where there's a situation of loss that you can take matters into your own hands in order to stave off any further loss. Incredible. So I was saying, now let's analyze this. We're going to spend some time really plowing through this a little bit. So HaRav Chaim raised the kasha. Ben Bagbag Omer, Al tikanis lechatzer chavercha, lito es shalcha shelo bershos, shematira alav kiganov. So I'll say this is interesting. Salach l'maisa. If, let's say again, I lent an object to Ruvain, right? I went ahead, I lent my lawnmower to Ruvain. So what happens? So now Ben Bagbag says like this, but Ruvain's not giving it back. So Ben Bagbag says, don't walk, secretively or stealthily into the reshus of Ruvain to get back your lawnmower. Why? Because then it looks like you're a ganov. It looks like you're a thief. So rather, what should you do? The Gemara says, Ella shivara shinov, break his teeth. Va'omer lo, sheli ani notel, and say, I'm taking my lawnmower. In other words, if somebody has your stuff and they're not giving it back to you, don't go surreptitiously in there sneaking around like a ganov, like a thief. Go in there, march in, punch him in the mouth, knock out his teeth, right, and tell him, I'm taking my stuff back. I will say, now obviously, don't knock out anyone's teeth, right? This is an expression. Rashi says over here, Shivara Shinov. Rashi says, Kilomar kach bechazaka. Rather, stand up for yourself. Stand up for yourself, and you could even use a little bit of force in order to be able to take back yours. It's your stuff. It's your lawnmower. In other words, we'll say once again, what is this? What is this? This is a case. Ultimately, again, this is a case of where clearly the law is on my side. The law is on my side. And what is Ben Bagbag saying? Ben Bagbag is saying, when the law is on your side, take it. Take it. And even use a little bit of force, which means you could take the law into your own hands. So this clearly sides with Rav Nachman, and ultimately, again, is against Rabbi Yehuda. Amarle. So Rabbi Yehuda would respond. Amarle, he responds back. Top of Chavches. So Imach ben Bagbag yichidahu upligi rabbanan alei. Ben Bagbag is a singular opinion. In other words, so the Imach, Rashi says over here, again, this is what you have, like this is the question you're bringing. Okay, there's an opinion, Ben Bagbag. But just because Ben Bagbag says it, in no way makes that the majority opinion. This is an opinion, but ultimately, again, the Rabbanan disagree. Good. Rabbi Yanai Amar, my Shavar Shinov. So furthermore, Rabbi Yanai says, what does it mean when Ben Bagbag says, break his teeth? Bedin. It means break his teeth with judgment. In other words, haul him into court. Haul him into court, bring him to Beis Din. And I will say, in other words, it's actually interesting. It's actually interesting. So what Ben Bagbag was saying, I will say, is, on one hand, you might say, we are a people who values shalom so much. So therefore, maybe, Reuven's not returning my lawnmower. You know what? Let it go. Let it go. So I will say, so remember, as much as we value shalom, you also have to stand up for that which is right and stand up against that which is wrong. So someone takes your stuff, you don't roll over for that. You don't, it's interesting, I would say, in Judaism, we do not have the concept of turn the other cheek. We don't have that concept. That is not a Jewish value. Right? So in other words, if somebody hurts you, ultimately, again, you have the ability, first of all, don't let yourself be hurt. In other words, turn the other cheek sounds like, like somebody slaps you on one cheek. You say, yesterday may I have another, on the other one. So first of all, no, I don't do that. And also, again, if I'm wronged, I have every right to stand up for myself. So therefore, Ben Bagbag says, break his teeth. Not break his teeth, literally take it back by force. Break his teeth, bring him to Beis Din. Here's the problem with that. So the Gemara says, Ihachi va'amarlo. The way it reads is, break his teeth and tell him, I'm taking mine. It shouldn't say amarlo, you tell him. Rather, it says omrimlo. They tell him, i.e. Beis Din tells him, furthermore, shaliani no tell. It shouldn't say, I'm taking my stuff. Rather, again, if it's Beis Din talking, shalohu no tell me by. Beis Din should say to Ruvain, that I'm taking my stuff, he is taking his stuff. To which the Gemara says, kasha. Inachinami, you're right, that's a kasha. So both say, so once again, this machlokis Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Nachman place itself out on how you view the Ben Bagbag idea. Is Ben Bagbag saying, stand up for yourself, take matters into your own hand, and take your property back, like Rav Nachman? Or is he saying, no, rather break his teeth and then haul him into the legal system, into Beis Din, but Lamaisa, again, you cannot take matters into your own hands, so I'm going machlokes. So Tashma. So what says, Gemara goes weiter. Shar sha'ala gabe chaver lahargo. Interesting case over here. One shar, climbed on top of another shar and was ready to kill him. Right? So upper shar was ready to kill lower shar. Oba balatachton v'shamat eshalo, and the owner of the lower ox comes and pulls his ox out. V'nafal al elyon umeis, and I will say now what ends up happening. Now the upper shar, which was the aggressor, falls down on the ground and dies. So what's the halacha? Pater. Ultimately, again, the owner of the lower shar who pulled out his lower shar is pater. He's not obligated for the fact that now the upper shar died. Okay, so let's analyze. My love bimuad deleka psida. Now let's say, are we not talking about a case where the upper shar is an muad? Now we'll say, now remember again, let's play this out. If upper shar is a muad and kills lower shar, then what's the halacha? What's the halacha? Nezek shalim, complete damages. In which case, I will say what that means is the owner of the lower shar was not going to suffer a loss. Right? In other words, he didn't have to do anything. He could just leave the situation alone. Leave his shar is going to die, nebach, but it's okay, he's going to be made whole because the upper shar is a muad anyway, who's going to have to pay nezek shalim. So the Gemara says, but we'll say, but yet, what do you see over here? Yet you see that halacha l'maisa, he is allowed to intervene to go ahead and stave off his own loss. Meaning he's allowed to take the law into his own hands, even though it results in the death of the upper shar, right? Even though he would have collected full damages. So that seems to side with Rav Nachman, that Avid Inish Dina L'Nafsheh, a person can take the law into his own hands. To which Gemara says, no, lo, betam dika pseda. No, it's actually talking about a tam animal. The upper shar is a tam. Now we'll say, if the upper shar is a tam, then what? That is a case of loss. Right? Why is that a case of loss? Because remember, tam only pays chatzi nezek. So now the owner of the lower shar is looking at this. If he does nothing and the lower shar is killed, the most he's going to collect is chatzi nezek. So now, this is a case of ikapseda. This is a case of where there's a loss. Everyone agrees that when there is loss, then what? You could take the law into your own hands. To which the Gemara says, Lo betam de ikapseda. If that's the case, look at the end of the Raisa. Dachvo le'elyon umeis chayiv. If the owner of the lower shar comes and pushes off the upper shar, and as a result the upper shar dies, then the pusher, right, the owner of the lower shar, is going to be chayiv. But I don't understand, if we're talking about a tam, am I chayiv? Then I will say, why should the owner of the lower shar be chayiv if he pushed off the upper shar? After all, again, I will say, he's staving off a loss. That is pseida. To which the Gemara says, I'll tell you why. Shelo shamtov lo shamto. Because again, the owner of the lower shar could have accomplished the same thing by what? Pulling his animal out. He did not have to push off the upper shar. Rather, he could have saved his animal by pulling it out. And that way again, avoiding pushing the upper shar. Okay, so we'll say, so therefore again, that case is also inconclusive. So remember again, we're just bringing all of these cases to kind of clarify the machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Nachman. Next, Tashma. Interesting case here. Ruvain goes over to the field of Shimon, and what does he do? He fills up the chutzner of Shimon with jugs of oil and jugs of wine. Right? So just to be clear, so Ruvain goes over to Shimon's field and fills up Shimon's field with jugs of oil, jugs of wine. So what's the halacha? So Shimon, the owner of the field, has the ability to actively smash the jugs on his way in and smash the jugs on his way out. In other words, somebody put jugs in his property, he has the right to smash them in order to get out. So we'll say, Rav Nachman. So we'll say, what do you see from there? That a person has the right to take the law into his own hands. In other words, Shimon could go to Beis Din and say, listen, Beis Din, Reuven placed his property in my property. It's not right. Please order the removal of it. Or he could just smash the jugs on his way in and on his way out. The halacha says he could smash the jugs on his way in and way out. So what does that show you? That you could take matters into your own hands. So the Gemara says, no. What it means is, he's allowed to go to Beis Din. On his way to Beis Din, he can smash jugs on his way to Beis Din, and if he needs to come back to retrieve, like a deed of ownership or something, he can smash jugs like that. So in other words, no. He can't take matters into his own hands. He has to go to Beis Din. But the difference just is that on his way to Beis Din or on his way back from Beis Din, he has the ability, right? See, he has the ability to clear a path for himself, so to speak. So therefore, again, no raya. So Tashma, B'nai Shaliner says Shakallo Yamav V'Rabba Mesarhi Bo Lotzeis V'Chava V'Asa B'Chabur Shupater. So I'll say this is an interesting case. Imagine for a second, Ruvain has an Eved. An Eved. In this case, it's an Eved Ivri. The Eved Ivri decided he wanted to stay after 6 years, and that becomes what we call a Nirtza. Right? You also remember Nirtza, his ear is pierced, he remains until Yovel. Yovel comes. Time to go. Let's say, ever have company who won't go home. So now this guy's got a decades long Eved. Guy, buddy, Eved, it's time to go home. Eved's not leaving. So we'll say, so what happens? The master now kind of like Mesaribo. Mesaribo means like he's pushing him out the door. And in the course of pushing the Eved out the door, what does he do? He injures him. They will say, now this is another Jew. So there's damages. He injures him. What's the halacha? Pater. They will say, now let's analyze the logic of that. Why would Reuven be pater for that? Why would Reuven be pater? Because remember again, Reuven is taking matters into his own hand. The halacha says, what happens at Yovel? Eved goes home. Eved's not leaving on his own. So Reuven is taking matters into his own hand and not so gently escorting the Eved out. And in the course of taking matters into his own hands, he injures the Eved. What's the halacha? Pater. What does that show you? That you're allowed to take matters into your own hands. Right? In other words, he can go to Beis Din and say, Beis Din, can you order the Eved to leave? But instead of doing that, he takes matters into his own hands and escorts the Eved out. So TALMUD Lomar, so the pastor will say Pater. So what does that show you? That shows you, like Rav Nachman.
There's no loss.
I'm sorry?
There's no loss.
Sure there is. The Eved is injured.
I'm sorry.
Right? So we'll say, so the Maseches can remember, again, there's damages. So ultimately, again, but the whole point is he doesn't have to pay damages over here because halacha l'meisa, you're allowed to take matters into your own hands. To which the Gemara says, Talmud Lomar, lo sichu kofer lashuv, lo sichu kofer lashav. So again, I will say the pasuk says, Darshan lo sichu kofer lashav. You don't have to pay kofer to the one, literally, again, I will say, who is sitting in your house. Rashi says over here, lo sichu kofer lashuv, darush ba l'shav, or the shave, l'mish sherotza lashuv, lekilkulo ulios eved lishnakrina l'shav lemisha dino lios shava mishpachto inarotz. Okay, point of is when it's actually in the pasuk that there's no kofar, there's no payment to this individual. So there seems to be a proof to Rav Nachman that you're allowed to take matters into your own hands. To which the Gemara says, no. Hachama askinan ba'avda ganva. We'll say, no, this is a different kind of case. This is a case of potential loss, right? Why? Because who are we talking about here? Why is this guy an Eved? Why is he an Eved? Because he was a thief. So now I will say, if I'm the owner of this Eved and he was an Eved because of a thief, it's in my best interest to get him out of the house as quickly as possible. Right? Because I'm scared that he's going to steal more stuff from me. So therefore, also what the Gemara is essentially answering is that halacha l'maisa, this is a case of loss. A case of loss or potential loss. Remember, everyone agrees that halacha l'maisa in a case of loss, what? In a case of loss, you have the right to take matters into your own hands. That's what everyone agrees. The Gemara says, 1 second, if he's a thief, the Gemara says, I understand. He's been living in your house for the last 40 years, right? So you weren't concerned that he's a thief for the last 40 years. Now suddenly you're concerned that he's a thief. So he says, I'll tell you why. There's a big difference, I will say. In the last number of years, this Eved was an Eved. And as such, he had a certain respect or reverence for the master. Now, he's emancipated. Now he's free. And as a free man, he does not have that same reverence for the master, and therefore there's an acute concern that he's going to steal. That's why the master is rushing him out of the house in order to stave off a loss. So this is a case of taking the law into your own hands in order to stave off a loss, which, as the Gemara said before, everyone agrees is permitted. Everyone agrees is permitted. Incredible. Different case. It's also a case where you know why the Eved is delaying leaving the house? Because the master gave him a maidservant. That's why he's leaving. I will say now, remember, an Eved is allowed to produce offspring with a shifcha, with a maidservant, when he's an Eved. But once he's emancipated, Rabbi say he's he's a regular Jew, he's not allowed to have relations with the Shivcha. So you can tashma. So Rabbi says, therefore again, we don't have a raya. So therefore Rabbi say again, where are we holding? Right where we started. We have this machlokes Rav Nachman Rabbi Yehuda. Are you permitted to go ahead and take the law into your own hands? Rabbi Yehuda says absolutely not. Rav Nachman says absolutely yes, in cases where it is clear that the law is on your side. Exception, everyone agrees, where you are going to suffer a loss. We're going to suffer a loss. Halacha l'maisa. Halacha l'maisa, in a case of loss, you are permitted to go ahead and take matters into your own hands. So tashma, hamaniach esakad b'rshus harabim. If a person ultimately again is leaving a jug in the rshus harabim, uba achav v'niskalba, and someone else goes out and trips over it, v'shavra, and he went ahead and smashed the utensil, pater. They're both saying, I remember again, this is our Mishnah. Right? Reuven leaves his jug in the rshus harabim. Shimon comes along and trips over it and also smashes the jug. Shimon's pater. Now, taima de niskalba. Now, the reason ultimately Shimon is pater is why? Because he tripped over it. Hashavra, but if Shimon were to intentionally go ahead and smash it, ultimately, again, he would be chayiv. Amr Rav Zvid Mishmei de Rabba. So Rav Zvid say in the name of Rabba, Hu adin afilu shavra. The truth is, this would be the halacha even if you intentionally broke the utensil. V'Hy'd diktani niskal. So why does it say you tripped over it? Aidi dikaboy lemisni seifa im huzuk balachavis chayiv benisko dafkun niskal. Aval shavar lo du azik l'nafshei. So we'll say the truth is, one can make the argument that if Reuven left his jug in rshus harabim, right, and Shimon, whether Shimon tripped over it or Shimon intentionally broke it, there's no liability there. So why does the Mishnah phrase it? We had this answer. Why does the Mishnah phrase it as a case of tripping over it? That's because of the seifa. Always the seifa that if Reuven goes ahead and trips over the utensil and breaks it and is injured by the utensil, in that case, ultimately, Reuven is going to be chayiv. But if Shimon purposely breaks the utensil, even though he might be entitled to do so, if he's injured as a result of that, there's no liability on the part of Reuven. Why not? Because Shimon did it to himself. Right? That's a case, so I'll say, where you cause the inhars. No one asks you to stamp on the utensil. Maybe you have the right to do so, but if you do so of your own volition, even if you have the right and you're injured, that's on you. Katani Reisha Niskal. So as I said, for again, as a result, we go ahead and in order to create Mishnaic symmetry, we also write in the beginning of the Mishnah a case ultimately again of where he goes ahead and trips over it, even though halacha l'maisa, it could be that he has the right to stomp on it as well. Okay, Tashma, v'katzosas kappa. So as I remember, we actually referenced this case yesterday. Reuven and Shimon are having a fight. And what happens? In order to break up the fight, so Reuven's wife goes ahead and grabs Shimon in the private parts of his body in order to break up the fight. So I will say, so there is a particular penalty payment over there that Reuven's wife has to pay. Rashi said, the pasuk over here is Kirasu anashim yachtov, two men are fighting, right? Ish va'achiv, vekarva isha sa'echa v'hatzal es isha miyar makeu, v'shalcha yada v'chazika b'mevushav. So it says there's a penalty payment that she has to pay, boshes. She has to pay for humiliation in that case. So Gemara says, my love, b'shini yochol lahatzil ayidei davar acher. And I will say, is this not a case where the only way for Reuven's wife to break up the fight is to take this extreme measure? If that's the case of us, then this is a case of what? This is a case of a person taking the law into their own hands, but in a situation of loss. To which the Gemara says, no, lo, no, this is actually a case where halacha l'maisa, she has the ability to break up the fight in a different way. If there was no other way to break up the fight, then she would be pater. There would be no liability on her part. If that's the case, Adatani Seifa, look at the end of that brayso. V'shulcha yado, shav yada, prat l'shliach bezdin. So Rabbi says, this is interesting. So remember, it is only in this case where the woman is chayiv, or generally a person is chayiv for boshes. But Rabbi say, if a shliach bezdin was executing an agency of the bezdin, but as a result they humiliated someone, right, in the course of execution of that agency, there is no obligation for boshes payment. We'll talk about this in greater depth. There is no obligation for boshes payment. Why don't we just say lifnog v'lisnei b'didei? go ahead and, I will say, instead of going into a different case, go ahead and literally go a little bit deeper in this particular case. How so? When is this woman, right, the wife of Ruvain, chayiv for Bosh's the nation of Shimon, when she had the ability to potentially save her husband through some other course of action. But if she didn't have the ability to save her husband through a different course of action, so p'tura, ultimately, again, she is pater. She is pater. To which the Gemara says, you're right, this is what we're saying. When is this so ultimately that she is chayaves in a boshes and humiliation payment? When she has the ability to save her husband through a different course of action. But if she doesn't have the ability to save her husband through a different course of action, in other words, the only way to break up this fight was to engage in this extreme behavior. So Naaseh Yada Kishliach Bezdin Uptura. She is no different than an agent of the court, and she would be ptura from any boshes. Okay, interesting. Tashma Harush said Derech HaRabbi Moveres Pesach Sadeu. This is an interesting case. We'll say, let's say again, I have a property, but the public has a path through my property. Okay, both it happens. Right? Sometimes again, there's a shortcut that's established through someone's backyard, and it's an established route. So it's like, what's the halacha? So the Gemara says, not la v'nasla min atzad. Let's say I decide one day, you know what? I don't want people coming through my backyard anymore. So instead, but here's what I'm willing to do. Right now, the path cuts through the middle of my backyard. I'm not happy with that. So what I'll do is I'll give them a path on the side. I'll even pave it. I'd put up lights, refreshment station, right? I'll go ahead. So I'm moving it to the side. So I'll say, what's the halacha? This is incredible. Mashenasan nasan, the additional path you gave them, shkoyach, v'shaloh lo agiu. But they still also have the path to the middle of your yard. In other words, you can't take back the path from the middle of the yard once it's been established for public use. So you kind of get hit twice. So the new path you gave them, that's theirs also. But the old path, that's also theirs. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. Vi amrit avid inish dinalanashe linkot paz revelasev. I will say, if a person has the right to take the law into their own hands, then what? I should be able to sit on the path that's in the middle of my yard with a stick and say, you want to come through? Let's go. Right? Let's go. Let's see you get through. I was saying I could hit everyone with a stick as they trespass, or at least threaten to hit them with a stick, as they trespass my yard. I will say, the concern is like this. You have a right, technically speaking, to replace one path with another path. The concern is that the second path can't be a more tedious route than the first. So the concern over here is that if we allow you to replace the path with a new path, aklason literally means a diagonal. You're going to make it longer for the public to get from point A to point B. That's the case. The case I will say is where I replace path A with path B, but path B is a more circuitous route. So in that case, what's the halacha? The circuitous route is theirs, and the new path is also theirs. Ravashi, I don't understand. Ravashi says, Kol minat sad, derech akloson hu, krovo lazeh u'rechok lazeh. So Ravashi says, here's the problem. By definition, any time you replace the path, it's considered to be a circuitous path. Why? Because we'll say, if you're moving that path, then by definition, what does that mean? That is going to be further for someone. And you don't have a right to go ahead and inconvenience the public after the public have already established a route. If that's the case, so I'll say, so fine, I can accept it. I will say, this is actually, this case comes up all the time. When people buy a home, right? A person buys a home, and the previous owner had let the public cut through his yard. Right? Suddenly, again, I'm a more private person. I don't want everybody cutting through my yard. It's a big discussion, halacha. And there's absolutely a concept that once the public have kind of an established route and an owner allowed them, it's not pashut to take that back from the public and to shut them out. In any event, so I say, so now I understand. Let's accept this premise. Let's accept this idea that once a route has been established for the public, you don't have the ability to take it back. Okay, so fine. So we'll say, so let's go back to the case. I have a property. The public had a route through my backyard. I don't want them to use it anymore. I give them a route on the side of my yard. So what's the halacha? Doesn't work. Doesn't work. But into what the Brisa said was, now both routes belong to the public. You don't even get back with the side route that you gave them. Where it says, I understand why. So here's what I don't understand. I understand my inability to change the routes from the middle of my yard. But at least then what should happen? I should get back the second route on the side of my yard, let that come back to me, and let the public keep its original route. But yet that's not the halacha. The halacha is the public gets both, and I don't get back either of them. What's the pshat? To which the Gemara says, Mishud Rav Yehuda, Leima Loshkol V'Havali Didi, Mishud Rav Yehuda, Dam Rav Yehuda, Meitzar Shech Zikul Barabim, Asr Lekalkalo. Because what Yehuda says, essentially, once halacha l'maisa, you have a path that the public has taken hold of. They made a chazaka on, you can't take it back. So the assumption in this case over here is, I gave the public the side route, and I will say, what did they do? People started using it. So once they started using it, that's it, you can't take it back. So I'm literally, again, I'm at a disadvantage of both. So now suddenly I went from wanting to exchange one route for another, to having given the public actually two different routes. Okay, Tashma. What was the interesting case? I have a field, and I set aside payah on the north corner. Payah is the obligation to leave a corner of your field to the poor. So I'm a good Jew, I try to be a good Jew. I leave payah on the north side. We'll say, what ends up happening? Aniyim, for some reason, and poor people end up helping themselves to payah on the south side. Only one problem. I didn't designate the south side as payah. I designated the north side as payah. So what's the halacha? Zeh v'zeh payah. They're both payah. So the Gemara says, so ve'ein omrim avid inish dilan afshay. So both say, so again, and we don't say now, I'm not allowed to go ahead and say, guys, no, go ahead and start yelling or hitting aniyim and say, no, not the south side, the north side. But the Gemara says, amai zeh v'zeh payah. Linkot Pazra Velesev. Why are both payah? Why can't I go with the staff and chase them away, ultimately again from the south side, move them to the north side? Amarav Maizev is payah. What does it mean that both are payah? Lepotran min ha-maiser. It ultimately means to exempt them from maiser. Look at Rashi. Lepotran min ha-maiser. Da'af payah hanish eres hefker chashiva v'af agav dinoket le'iup trumaser. No, I was supposed to say, if it turns out that poor people start taking from the south side, that could be the payah. In other words, I could shift the designation and ultimately make the south side payah. So what about the north side? So the north side is not payah, but interestingly enough, the north side is pater from meiser. They'll say why. So it's interesting. Remember again, halacha l'maisa, anything that is ownerless, that is hefker, ultimately again is set aside, is exempt from meiser. So we'll say something interesting. So I designated the north side for payah. The aniyim end up taking from the south side. So that's fine. I could switch the payah designation now to the south side, and the north side is not going to be payah anymore. But even though the north side is not payah, here's what's fascinating: it's tax exempt, so to speak, right? It's pater from meiser. Why? Because since it was hefker for some amount of time, once something is hefker, even if it's subsequently reclaimed, it remains exempt from meiser. Fascinating, right? Fascinating. So I'll say another example of this. Kedisanya. Here's the example of this. Hamafkirs karmo. If I make my vineyard hefker, vehishkim baboker ubatzra, and then I wake up the next morning and I reclaim it and I harvest it, chayyir beparit olos b'shicha b'peah. Your chayyil say parit and olos is leaving behind underdeveloped grapes, undeveloped clusters for the poor, or shichacha and peah, leaving behind the bundle, or again a sheaf, or patra min ha-meiser. But it is patra min ha-meiser. There's an interesting halacha that says that if something was ownerless, even for a brief period of time, even if you subsequently reclaim it, halacha l'meiser, it's going to be patra from meiser. So we'll say it happens to be, it's an interesting tax loophole. That technically, if you want to exempt your property from meiser, what you could do is make it hefker, even just for a couple of moments, right? And what? Reclaim it afterwards. Now, there's some dangers in that process, is that other people could claim it in the interim. And there's a process, but technically speaking, it works. So therefore, I will say, the Gemara is making a very interesting suggestion over here. That halacha l'maisa, what you could do is, now in this case over here, so what's happening is, I made the north side of my field payah. The aniyim, for some reason, are collecting from the south side, thinking that's payah. That's fine. I could switch the payah designation to the south side. So now the south side is payah, the north side is no longer payah. But even though the north side is no longer payah, nevertheless, what? Nevertheless, halacha l'maisa, it still remains tax exempt. Why? There is no ma'aser obligation. Why? Because since halacha l'maisa, it was hefker for some amount of time, that hefker designation ultimately, that for a certain amount of time, allows it to remain exempt from ma'aser. Good. So I'll say, so now, leave off this again, we're finished. Baruch Hashem, Mazel Tov, new Mishnah. What's the halacha? Is a person allowed to take the law into their own hands? In any case, where I'm right, or dafka in a case of psidis. So we'll say, listen to this. So the Rambam Paskins, Rabbis, listen to this. Yesh li adam lasos din liatzmo, im yesh biyado koach, hoil v'chadas v'chalochu oseh, eino chayiv litrach v'lavo lebezdin, afapi shalahaya sham hefsid b'nechasav, ilu nisacher uba lebezdin. So we'll say the Rambam Paskins like Rabbi Yehuda. Like Rav Nachman. Then we'll say, if I know that there is a case where it is clear, there's no dispute, there's no two sides, the halacha is with me, I have a right to take matters into my own hands, and the system doesn't require me to go to Beis Din when it is clear that the halacha is on my side. So just to give you like a simple, explicit situation, right? I lent my lawnmower to Ruvain. Ruvain is not returning it. Ruvain's not returning it. I will say, there's no two sides to this. Ruvain's not giving it back to me. I have a right to go to Ruvain's property and take it back. I have a right to go ahead and, now, can I break into his house in order to go ahead and get it? So I said, that could be a bit more problematic. But Lamaisa, I don't have to go to Beis Din. I don't have to begin a legal proceedings to get back that which is mine. Rather, I have a right to punch him in the teeth, right? Punch him in the teeth. In other words, with a show of force, and to go ahead and take back which is mine. So the logic of the Rambam is, where it is clear that you are in the right and someone else is in the wrong, the halacha doesn't require you to go through the difficulty of accessing the legal system. Because we'll say again, I have to call up the Beis Din, I have to get a date in Beis Din, I have to go to Beis Din. Again, it's a tircha where it's clear. Now, again, it has to be a case where it's unequivocally clear that I am in the right and the other person is in the wrong. We pass like Rabbi Yehuda, Avid inish dina linafshei. Ultimately, again, halacha l'maisa, a person could take matters into his own hand. Now, the Rambam will say goes even a step further. This is true even in a case where there's not a loss, right? I was will say, for example, it's winter time. I don't need my lawnmower, right? I don't need my lawnmower, right? So there's no loss. Or I can go to Beis Din. There's time to go ahead and adjudicate this, but even though there's time to adjudicate it, again, the halacha doesn't require me to go to Beis Din. Certainly where there's a case of loss, of course I can take matters into my own hand. Even when there is no case of loss, I don't have to do that. I will say, that's the Rambam. We don't have time for it today. The Shulchan Aruch has a much greater arichos on this. Actually, it's a fascinating sif in Shulchan Aruch with a massive Ramah. That gets into some more of the technical applications of this. But just know, in what we call the halacha evasion, just in the straight out halacha, we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, that avid inish dina linafshei. Sorry, like Rav Nachman, I'm sorry. Like Rav Nachman, that lo avid inish, sorry. Pass like Rav Nachman, avid inish dina linafshei, a person can take matters into their own hands. Halacha l'maisa, even in a case where there is not a loss. Incredible. Mishnah. We'll say, let's go. Nishbra kadosh sarabim. So we'll say, here we go. Right? Reuven has a jug, and the jug smashed Nish sarabim. V'hochlak echad b'mayim, and Shimon comes along and slips on the water of the jug. So we'll say, in this case over here, the jug had water, the jug breaks, so Shimon slips on the water, and ultimately what happens? O shalaka b'charases, or he becomes injured with the shards of the jug. Chayiv. Ultimately, again, Reuven is chayiv. Rabbi Yehuda says, "B'miskavin chayiv, b'einu miskavin pater." So Rabbi Yehuda says, excuse me. Thank you. Rabbi Yehuda says, if there was intentionality. Now, again, we'll discuss exactly what that means in terms of intentionality. If there was intentionality, then Reuven will be chayiv. If there's not intentionality, not miskavin, Reuven is going to be pater. So we'll say, so this is now. Thank you. So this is now an interesting case. So we'll say, in this case over here. So remember again, what's happening? Reuven illegally placing the jug in Rosh Hashanah, right? what's happening now is the jug is breaking, but the injury is not happening as a result of, or like I said, there is a case where Shimon is being injured with the shard, but there's also now this additional case where Reuven is being injured through the water, right? Reuven slips in the water, right? Bepashta, something's happening as a result of the water. There's liability for that as well. So let's analyze this. Am Rabbi Yehuda Lo shan alo shenitfu kela b'mayim. So this is very interesting. Rav says, what's the case? The case is where Reuven's clothing is damaged by the water. Take a look at Rashi in just a moment. Last Rashi in the Daf. Ela shetinfu kela b'mayim. The Rab muki lemasnisin b'shelo hifkir is meimav. Hilchach nimtza shenizuku kelev shalzeh b'maono shalzeh vavikishoro. I suppose that Rashi gives some coming attractions over here. Rashi is saying like this. What's the case of damage over here? The case of damage is where Reuven's clothing gets damaged by the water. Reuven's clothing gets damaged by, and what we're going to see is, according to Rav looks at the water as the shar, as the mammon, as the property of Reuven. And therefore it turns out that Reuven's water, is damaging Shimon's utensil, Shimon's clothing. That's why there's liability. Aval, Amud Beis. Aval, hu atzmo potter. But this is very interesting, I will say. But if Shimon slips on the water and hits the ground and is injured that way, Reuven is going to be potter. Why? Karka olam hizikaso. Because what I will say is incredible. Because Reuven could claim, I didn't injure you. What injured you? The ground injured you. That was the ground that injured you. Me, I didn't do anything. The ground injured you. To which the Gemara says, Ki Am Yisroel Shmuel. When this was said before Shmuel, Amrli. So Rabbi Shmuel said, one second, let's add it. So Rabbi says, what's incredible about this is, according to Rav, the water in the jug has the status ultimately again of the shar, of the mammon of Reuven. And therefore again, when Reuven's clothing, his utensils, get damaged by the water, then there's liability for that. But if Reuven slips and gets hurt on the ground, so Reuven could say, I didn't do that to you. The karka, the land, did that to you, no liability. So basically in Shmuel, we said this before, Shmuel, Amrli, he said, Michti, avno v'sakiva masa mibar l'manda. Both in general, if a person's stone, or his load, right, or his knife, or his load, injured someone else, that's generally a derivative of a bar. Right? So in other words, when my inanimate object goes in and damages someone, generally that's a derivative of bar. So mibar lamanu, the kulan ani karban, and also regarding all of those things we say, shar velo adam, right? You also remember again, when it comes to bar liability is only for an animal and not for a person. Right? If a person falls into a bar, there's not liability. Chamar velo kalim, and there's only liability ultimately again for an animal and not utensils. And that's only if my bar kills something, right? If something dies in my bar. But also remember again, there's not liability. If I have a bar and a person falls in and dies, I don't have liability, right? I have a bar and kalim fall in and they're broken, ultimately again, no liability. Avalein zikin chayiv. But for damages, one is absolutely chayiv, v'kalim p'turin. And ultimately for utensils, one will be part of the. So this is this. So we'll say this is fascinating. Machlokes Rav and Shmuel, how do you view the water that spills out of the broken jug? According to Rav, the water is viewed as the shar of Reuven. Fascinating. And therefore, again, if Shimon's utensils, if his clothing gets damaged, Reuven is going to be chayiv. But ultimately, if Shimon slips and falls, then that's not Reuven's mama that's damaged, that's the karka that's damaging, and Reuven will be pater. According to Shmuel sees the water as the bar. It's a bar of Reuven. If it's a bar of Reuven, then if Shimon slips and dies, there won't be liability. If Shimon's utensils get damaged, there's no liability. But if Shimon slips and falls and gets damaged, there absolutely is liability. Fundamental machlokes. For Rav, how do you mean the hechad ifkarinu? Furthermore, Rav says that's only if you made the water hefker or the bar hefker. But if you don't make the water hefker, then mamonahu. Then indeed, ultimately, again, it would be. This is Rab. The only time, right? It's only if it's hefker. But if you don't make it hefker, then ultimately, again, the water remains your mamon. So both say, so fundamental machlokes over here. How do we view the water that spills out of the jug? According to Rav, it's the mammon of Reuven, just like Yishar. According to Shmuel, it is the bar of Reuven. So Mafsir Rav Osher Vasher is a kasha v'nafal shamar shar o chamar. So as I was talking about bar, Torah talks about again a shar or a chamar falls into the bar. Shar v'lo adam, chamar v'lo kelim. That teaches us a solution. One is only liable for a shar, but not for a person. A chamar, not for utensils. Mikan amr, from here we see Nafal l'socho shar v'kela v'nishtabru. We'll say, right, if I dug a pit, or Reuven dug a pit, and what happens? The shar of the utensils of Shimon fall in, and they are broken. So what's the halacha? Chamor v'kela v'niskaru, or a chamor, and utensils fall in and they're torn. Chayiv ala behema upater ala kelim. In general, both say, one is only liable. Bar liability only extends to an animal, doesn't extend to utensils. So to what is this comparable to? This is comparable to a case of one who places down his stone, his knife, or his load. They do damage. What is it? It should say, what is comparable to this? What is comparable to this? So we'll say, therefore, we'll say, so watch this. Therefore, I want to listen to this. If a person is carrying a jug, right? Reuven is carrying a jug, and Shimon left the stone, right? Left the stone there, and Reuven smashes his jug against the stone. Ultimately, again, should be liability. So the Gemara says, here's the problem. Reisha kash l'Rav, Seifa kash l'Shmuel. This Reisha is problematic according to Rav, and the Seifa is problematic according to Shmuel. U'l'tamecha, according to that logic, tikshi l'cha hi gufa. Reisha pater v'Seifa chayiv. We'll say there's a bigger problem, because in the Reisha, the first case we're saying you're part, the Seifa we're saying you're chayiv. Ela Rav mataris l'tamei, u'Shmuel mataris l'tamei. We'll say both Rav and Shmuel interpret this according to their respective reasoning. How so? Rav mataris l'tamei. Rav will say as follows: B'medar murim. When is this so? B'shef kiran. They will say, when does an object become a bar? When does it actually become a bar? We'll say only when what? When you make it hefker. Because if you retain ownership over it, these same objects have the status of your mammon, which is your shar. Avaloif kiran. Now remember, if you're mafkir, it becomes a bar. If it becomes a bar, then what? There's only liability for animals and not for kalim. However, avaloif kiran. But if you don't make it hefker, then it's not your bar. Rather, what is it? It's your shar. And if it's your shar, chayiv, there's liability even for damage to utensils. Lefichach, therefore, hitiach tzuchiso be'even chayiv. Therefore, I will say again, in a case where, let's say, Reuven smashed his utensil against the stone of Shimon, and Shimon was not mafkir that utensil, that stone, therefore, again, that's the mammon of Shimon damaging the kalim of Reuven and his liability. Shmuel answers questions. Wants to just quickly, let's finish. Now that we say that your even your stone, your knife, and your load is like your bar, so Rabbi Yehuda the mechayev amiske kelim bebar. According to the vichach, hitiach tzluchiso be'even chayiv. Therefore, Allah l'maisa, according to Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that you are responsible for damages of utensils by a bar. Ultimately, again, if Reuven smashes his utensil against Shimon's stone, there'll be liability. I will stop over here for today. I'll say, but again, just understand what we're leaving off in the middle of is essentially in this case in the Mishnah, where sorry, that went a little fast, but in the last case in this case in the Mishnah, where again, Reuven left his utensil, the utensil breaks, ultimately the water spills out. Shimon is damaged in the water. What's the status of the water? Rav is going to say the water has the status of the mammon of Reuven, if as long as Reuven wasn't mafkirit, and therefore again one will be responsible if ultimately Shimon's clothing is damaged. But if Shimon falls and hits the ground, Reuven can say, I didn't damage you, the ground damaged you. Shimon says, no, water has the status of bar. Because water has the status of bar, again, therefore will be chayiv for kalim, chayiv for adam, and chayiv for kalim for damages. In the website to be continued tomorrow. What's the status of the water? Machlokes, resolution tomorrow. Shkoyach.